Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Talk Elevation by Fanday Nation. I'm your host, Mikayla Nagl, and today we're talking about a skill that shapes leadership, performance, and confidence in high pressure moments: communication. My guest today is Tiana Sanchez, founder and executive communications strategist of Tiana Sanchez International. With more than 15 years of experience, Tiana has helped leaders, professionals, and athletes communicate with clarity, structure, and confidence when it matters most. First, though, let's see what Fanday Nation has to offer. The odds are small. Out of 10,000 high school athletes, fewer than 1% ever go pro. Talent alone is not enough. Visibility matters. Fanday Nation helps athletes and coaches get seen, heard, and remembered through professional content, exposure, and storytelling, because everyone deserves to be seen. Learn more at fandaynation.com. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. We're excited to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad we're talking about this because it's kind of the unspoken rule, but the secret sauce that people need to know. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also want to welcome you to our team. You are our new media and communications trainer here at Fanday
Well, thank
Nation.
you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be a part of the team.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive right in. Let's talk about why talking is so important and communicating through that. So why have you made communication and speaking the central focus of your work, and why do you believe the skill is so often overlooked?
Well, my mother would say that I came out of the womb, came into this world talking. I was always a little sassy girl growing up, spoke my mind, probably to my detriment. As a young child, I recall my aunts and my uncles saying that I was ornery. Now I'm probably dating myself because I am a Gen Xer, but ornery was a term. It was a term of endearment, but it was someone who was a little bit sassy, very outspoken, didn't really it wasn't tamed at that young age, but for me, I learned the importance of just speaking and being clear. I was never shy. I think that was the other thing. As a kid, my mother would hand out little tracts, we would call them, almost like pamphlets to people in a park, like strangers in a park. And she would ask me if I would go up to strangers and hand them this little pamphlet. It was to talk about, it was like talk about faith and Christianity or something like that. And
Mhm.
I think I had to be like maybe 6 or 7 years old. And my older sister was shy. My younger brother was too young. And she would give the little tracts to me, and I'd walk up to people and I'd hand them out just very confidently and not being shy. I didn't know that that was a gifting. So
Mhm.
fast forward, I am now working in different positions, leadership positions. At 17, I started managing. And so you got to grow up real fast at 17 years
Mhm.
old, managing a team of people. And then fast forward from there, I became a speaker. And so speaking really was the moment I would say that I started to see the importance and impact of having a voice and confident and having a message and being able to articulate that. So that's my origin story, we'll call it.
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it is our first skill that we learn is talking, and it is a gift to people who are introverts compared to extroverts, of just being able to talk to people like you did when you were a kid, just going up to people and handing out cards. I mean, that's a gift that a lot of people overlook, like you said, for sure.
Yes,
S-
you don't have to be an extrovert. You can be an introvert.
right. So you've said that speaking doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. What are the most common communication challenges you see in high pressure environments?
Well, I think just the last thing I even said, the extrovert and introvert, and it's really
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
extroversion and introversion. It's a preference, not a
Okay.
label. So I want to clarify that. But I do think those that are possibly prefer more introversion may struggle putting themselves out there in different environments. And I should say, kind of speaking over that confidence piece. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't come naturally to people at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think we think we're really great communicators, but our litmus test of our communication is not based on how well we do, it's how well the other person understood what we said. So there's
Mm.
a level of comprehension and awareness. Most conversations, and you probably would agree, we don't walk away saying, "Did you understand what I said?" Or "Can you repeat back to me what I said?" Or, just making sure that what you said landed with the intention that you hoped it would.
Hmm.
In most situations, I should say a lot, there's quite a few challenges that I see, and you could tell me if you've experienced this, but rambling, so you have the ramblers, people that just go on and on and on and don't know when to stop and pause.
Hmm.
Then there's the infamous filler words. These are your ums, your uhs, your likes, your you knows. They can really kill a conversation. And then there's those that don't even answer the question that was asked. They kind of go around and scoot around the question. And it kind of all comes to structure and confidence and clarity. But those are some of the things that I see. In fact, I wrote an article about an interview that was actually done by the WNBA commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, last year. And I kind of dissected this interview that she did. And it was around the CBA negotiations for the women, which as of right now, still going on, depending on when this airs. But she responded to a question that a reporter asked her about a comment or statement that was made. It was a private conversation, a statement was made, and so the reporter was asking, "Did you in fact say this statement?" Well, in her response, which I dissected, it was a 1-minute response. In her 1-minute response, she used 14 filler words. Now, people might not know if that's acceptable or unacceptable. The average that you want to have in a 1-minute statement is about 4 or 5 at most. 4 or 5 filler words.
Okay.
So when she was responding to the question, not only did she have filler words, but she didn't really answer the question. So it made her appear not believable. It made her appear more confusing and not knowledgeable about what she was saying. And I don't know if you're aware of this particular interview that I'm talking about, but
Hmm.
it does, if you go back and listen to it, it doesn't leave you with the understanding that someone who was in this interview had good communication skills. It makes you think of the latter. So there's different techniques that I use, but those are some of the things, the rambling, the filler words, and not actually answering the question.
Yeah. I mean, especially in this industry that I work in, talking to people all the time, they're the big three, I see them all the time, almost every interview. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think I do know what interview you're talking about. And I remember seeing all over social media that they were like, oh, well, she did say that because she didn't say she didn't, they were like, she did say it. So there you
Right.
go. Yeah.
Right. It was deflection. It was definitely a technique. It was a technique, but and some people do that when they have the inability to respond to a question and articulate what they mean, then it can come across actually doing more damage than what you anticipated.
Yeah. This leads actually into my next question. How do clarity and structure directly impact confidence when someone's speaking or leading in real time?
When we think of communication, I don't think most people think of structure. Would that be a
Hmm.
fair statement? Probably. I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of people think, okay, I'm going into this conversation, I'm going into this meeting, I'm going to into this interview, into this podcast interview, thinking about structure. Like, how am I going to organize my thoughts? And that's part of the problem because people are left with an impression of you in that exchange. There's something called the 7-11 rule. Within the first 7 seconds, people make 11 assumptions about you. Now,
Wow.
whether or not that's true, but when you open your mouth, because the assumptions come from just your mere appearance, presence and your appearance is also a form of communication. How you walk into the room, how you sit, your posture, your eye contact, all of that are unspoken. We kind of know that, I think most of us. But when we're talking, we don't necessarily think of what do I want to say? What's the intent? What's the motive? And those are the kinds of things we should be asking ourselves. Even if it's an unplanned conversation, you're meeting with someone, you're just talking to them, think about what is it that you want to get out of the conversation? What's your intent? What's the motive? And what is your desired outcome? Are we just shooting around conversation? Are we just catching up? Do I want you to take an action on something? Do I want you to see my perspective or point of view? You need to understand your intent, your motive, and your desired outcome. One of the tools that I've used, and I learned this from being a career coach for a company that I used to work with for individuals who were in transition. They were rebuilding their resume. These are people who were employed, but they got laid off, and their company had paid for a service that would allow them to get some coaching and also have their resume redone. Many of them hadn't been in the workforce for a very long time. And so they were out of sync of like interviewing skills, like how to position themselves and all of that. And one of the techniques that stood out was this technique called SOAR. And it's SOAR, and it means situation, obstacle, action, and result. And I've learned to incorporate that into a lot of my conversations. So even if someone says, "Oh, hey, Tiana, what did you do this weekend?" I'm able to respond with a structure in mind so that when I respond, it's concise. So the S is the situation. It starts with the what, the when, and the where. So I can say, on Saturday, I was at home with my family watching the unrivaled basketball game that came on in the evening with my family. Whatever that is, it's just a very clean, crisp statement. One sentence. The O is the obstacle. Was there a challenge? You could substitute it with T for task, but was there any challenge associated with that? The challenge was that my son also has access to the channel, and we were going back and forth. So while he was watching, I was unable to watch the game. So that created a challenge. We all know that with the Netflix and the things, right? We got
Yes.
family members watching games. And then the A is action. What was the action that I took? So the action that I took, and you can say it in different ways, is so I decided to pause that game, find another game to watch to allow my son access to that channel. The R is the result. And as a result, he was able to watch his game, I was able to watch another game, and everybody was happy.
Mhm.
So when you put all that together, it's just a nice, concise response. Tiana, what did you do this weekend? Then I go through it. By the end, it should have taken less than 30 seconds.
Mhm.
But we don't think of an outline. And you can practice this in a lot of conversation. I actually trained my mother to use this because she's a rambler and she would be a little long-winded. And so I was like, okay, Mom, I'm gonna teach you this technique. And I want you to incorporate this. And she would, bless her heart, she would, and she has. And I've used this for other things. So definitely having that technique can help improve our communication.
So your mom does use it, you said, and is
Yes.
good at it too?
She has gotten better. She has
Okay.
definitely gotten better. It was a
Okay.
little difficult for her in the beginning, but she made so much good effort to use that. So, yes.
Okay, good. Well, talking about all different kinds of walks of life and all different people, you work with both executives and athletes. So, how does communication show up as leadership for someone who may not have a formal life?
Well, a title is not necessarily just seen in what's behind our name. People can be leaders in different
Mhm.
roles. You can have a, leader in a classroom, a leader on a team, a leader in an organization. So, when you're working with different groups, whether they're formal executives or athletes, they will show up a little differently. Even my tone and how I speak may look differently. So you have to understand the room and who you're speaking to, the dynamic of the room you're speaking to. So there is something called verbal proficiency or verbal ability. There's an assessment that I have used in the past for executives specifically, and even athletes can use it. And it actually evaluates your verbal proficiency. So in environments, it's going to look to see what kind of words do you use in different situations. And so people that have high verbal ability they have an expanded vocabulary. And that on the surface can seem really, really good. But then you have to take that and say, okay, well, I'm really strong. My verbal ability is really, really high. But let's take that same person and put them in front of middle school kids. How does that translate? And so I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you felt someone was talking above your level of understanding.
Mm,
If you ever been in that situation or
mhm,
been in a meeting where someone was using vocabulary and verbiage that just kind of went right over your head,
mhm.
that's not having an awareness of your verbal abilities. So number one is looking at the audience that you're in. And then you can use different language and different verbiage for those audiences. When you're talking to, in an executive environment, that looks different than when you're, talking to students. But I would say when we perfect these, when we actually communicate in those environments, it shows up in lowering communication costs, because believe it or not, miscommunication does cost us. It costs us our time, it costs us
Mhm.
money, it costs us resources. It can show up in a reduction of the frequency of meetings that we have. These can be team meetings or group meetings. I don't know but about you, but there is an overabundance of meetings that we have in our workplaces, in our life, and just outside. It's like we don't really need to have those many meetings. The frequency of meetings tells me or whether or not how clear you are in your ability to communicate the important stuff or not. Because we
Mm.
should be able to get what's on our agenda accomplished within our time frame. And that's 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It could also how it may show up is it's a conversation where two people are talking. It's not a one-way street. I look at it as like a little dance, a little salsa. So if we're in a conversation,
Mhm.
you're giving a little bit, I'm giving a little bit. You're receiving, I'm receiving. It's a dance that we're doing. It's not me talking at you, but it's a relationship, it's contribution that both of us have, and that could be seen and that should show up regardless of the environment that you're in, that there's a give and take in that conversation.
Yes, and that's so important just to not, I feel a lot of times if you have a certain personality or you just love to talk that nobody else really gets a word in, it's just that person taking up the entire room or the entire conversation and you don't even feel like you're a part of it. You could not even be there and that person could still go on.
That's
So,
the rambler.
yep,
Not the
that's the
gambler, but the
rambler.
rambler.
um Let's talk about communication gaps that you most commonly see within teams or collegiate athletes that you work with, and how do those gaps affect trust and collaboration?
So I learned from my mentor a few years ago that there's a high performing team. There's kind of four building blocks to a high performing team, and I think this is
Mhm.
true in sports and in corporations and just across the board. The first layer is trust. The second layer or second block, I should say, is communication. The third block is accountability, and the fourth block is execution. But if you look at the foundation, number one is trust. And so trust affects how you communicate to people. And if you don't believe me, just if you've ever been in a relationship, just think about if you ever had a conflict in that relationship. And if trust was eroded or fractured in that relationship, how you talked to each other. And I
Mhm.
think if we all go back and reflected on that, we probably would say, okay, the way I spoke probably wasn't with grace or with kindness or with tact or diplomacy. That probably should. I probably was a little snarky, a little short, a little curt. So I do think that some of the gaps that we experience is not understanding the kind of the flow of knowing that we have to have trust in order to communicate well. And if trust is eroded or fractured, it's absolutely going to affect the way that we communicate to other people. It's going to affect how we work with teams. It's going to affect how we follow up in emails, the infamous all caps emails, or the acronyms that we use in our text message, because this goes across all platforms of communication. We're talking
Mhm.
text messages, emails, Slack, phone calls. I mean, all of the methods. And each one is unique in its own way. But I do think that if we don't understand, if we're questioning our communication, Michaela, I would say let's go back and look at whether or not trust exists. Is it eroded? Has it been fractured? Is it completely gone? Are we rebuilding
Mhm.
it? Because that could, in fact, be the main thing that is causing miscommunication in your conversations that you're having.
Yeah. Well, what if they did something really bad and they deserve to be yelled at?
Well, I would say, and I think you're being facetious, but if you're feeling, but it brings up a good point. How do I respond in a way where my emotions are out of it? Or how
Mhm.
do I respond in a way where I'm not emotional, but I allow my emotions to be recognized? Because you can have emotions but not be emotional.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get what I call in the grip of our emotions, where we're hijacked and we're triggered by something
Mhm.
and immediately we respond without thinking. I was just having this conversation not too long ago with a friend of mine,
Mhm.
and she was telling me about a situation she was having with her significant other. and she was sharing with me her response, and I was kind of a little hesitant to give her some feedback. But if any of my friends know me, there's a technique that I use, and I always say, how do you want me to show up for you in this conversation? Do you want me to just be a sounding board? Do you want me to give you advice? Do you want me to just allow you to vent? That is also a form of communication, because we will give unsolicited advice as opposed to just being what that person needs us to be. So I asked her, she said, you know what? Be a sounding board and even give me a little advice. So now I've been given permission. So she's sharing the situation, and I say to her, I said, okay, so when you responded emotionally because you were upset, you were triggered, and she agreed. And I said, in that situation, when something happens, imagine like a really fast train. The conversation is going, words have been spoken, emotions have been heightened, and the train is on the track, but it's starting to derail. It's starting to derail a little bit, but you're constantly going. It's speeding down, down the road. And in those moments, I said, you got to pull the reins back. You got to slow the conversation down and take a beat. Because the worst thing you can do, especially in conversations, if they're a little tense, is respond without thoroughly thinking through your response. And I told her, I said, you got to pull the reins back. And when you pull the reins back, you allow yourself a beat, a moment, a pause. And pause is good. I think I'm probably, again, dating myself, but think before you speak was the quintessential anthem growing up. You think before you speak. And so pulling the reins back allows you to think through that. And I said, in those moments, maybe making statements may not always be the best thing. It could just simply be asked a question. So she was able to kind of redirect how she wanted to go about those conversations. But yeah, we want to avoid the yelling is basically all of that to say.
Okay. It's hard. It's very hard sometimes.
It is. That's the real, that's 100. That's the truth. You're speaking the truth.
Yes. Speaking of speak, can you talk a little bit about your work as the speak formula? Can you explain what that is, or verbal gymnastics, and how that helps people stay composed and effective under pressure?
So through the years, I have, as a speaker, as a facilitator and instructor over 2 decades now, there's a couple of things that I've gleaned, that I've learned, that have been really helpful. So the speak formula is part of an 8-week program that we piloted last year called the Speaking Edge. And it's an 8-week course where we spend an hour every week working through this kind of speak formula. So the S stands for structure. So beautifully, we already talked about that. What is the structure? And it is basically understanding that there is an open, middle, and close in a conversation. So again, it's that intention. What's the intention? What's the motive? What's my desired outcome? It's looking at that SOAR, right? So we're thinking of a specific structure. And this is specific to presentations. It could be used for interviews. It can be used for building out a keynote or a talk. It can be used in a lot of different ways. P stands for presence. So it is your physical presence that when you walk into a room and you show, but also your posture. It is the eye contact that you make. It is the confidence that you exude. So we talk about presence because, again, there's things that you say without even opening your mouth. And then we go to E, which is engagement. How do you engage the audience? And this is what the ramblers struggle with, because they're talking, but they're not engaging. Talking and engaging are two different things. Engaging is that there's something relatable. There is something relevant. I think that there are 3 things that we miss in conversations, but we should have. That's why TED Talks are so great, is because everything they're credible, logical, and emotional. If you go back and look at your favorite TED Talk, there was something credible in it. It made sense. It was logical. And there was an element of emotion that it evoked in you. Those 3 things make for a great talk, conversation, interview, press conference, meeting, what have you. And you can use that. So engagement is important. A is for articulation. And that is, again, as I'm talking to you, the words that I'm choosing to use, how I'm putting words together. It's like putting pieces of a puzzle together. It's art. It's poetry. It is something that you have to learn how to do and for the right audiences. And K, which is my favorite, is probably not something that you would think, but it's keep it concise. And that is brevity. Again, where the ramblers come in. I'm a huge Malcolm Gladwell fan, and he's written books and he's had podcasts, but I was listening to one of his podcasts and he learned something that said short, strong verbs, short sentences.
Mm.
Strong verbs, short sentences. And that to me is the mere definition of being concise. We don't need 25 PowerPoint slides. We just need a couple of good ones. We don't need 60 minutes. We should be able to get through it in 15. If you can understand brevity and have strong verbs, short sentences, then you're on your way of using the speak formula. And I'm happy to dive into verbal gymnastics, but I want to let's let that simmer for a moment.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let's talk about if someone wanted to start communicating effectively right now, they're listening right now, what's the first thing they should practice on today going forward?
Oh gosh, that's so good. I would say get out your cell phone, record yourself for talking about something for 1 to 3 minutes, okay?
Okay.
That is gonna give them a baseline. So before I can give them instruction, I think they need to have a good sense of how they sound, their tone, their pitch, their presence, and even using kind of that speak formula, I think is a great place to start. Just start looking at
Mhm.
how did you structure your conversation? How did you show up? Were you leaning? Were you hunched over? Your presence? Did you look confident? What were you talking about? What kind of words did you use? Was it too lengthy? So even using that speak is very helpful. Feedback would even be great. Share that 1 to 3 minute recording with someone. Hey, give me your honest feedback. Did this make sense to you? That could even be a really great place to start because people are so at such different levels of communication. I could say to someone, the first thing you need to do is reduce your filler words. Well, maybe they don't struggle with filler words, but they struggle with something else. So to say blanket, to everyone to try to do the same thing would be difficult. But I would say even just starting with kind of a very brief evaluation using that speak acronym that I just shared with them.
Okay, perfect. I might try that when I go home. I think I'm okay in camera, but you never know. You never know what you're actually like unless you watch yourself back.
Oh, yes.
My
Have you ever watched
producer's giving
yourself
me a
back?
so back over there.
Have you ever looked at yourself, recorded, watched a video of you?
Yes, I have, and I don't like it, but I think I just, I don't like looking at myself and hearing myself talk more than but maybe I should start doing more things like this, so maybe I will like myself in front of camera and talking.
Well, and just even in our conversation, there's many aspects of the speak that, we've touched on. As you're
Mhm.
using hands, that's part of presence and even communication because we use our hands and our body sometimes to speak. But I definitely
Mhm.
think getting a different lens to look at yourself
Mhm.
with the recording is helpful. I used to cringe because I used to have long hair.
Mhm.
And, people who sometimes you have long hair, you tend to like play with your
Mm.
hair. You'll do one of these moves, or you might twirl or something. And I remember I would give this weird facial expression after I asked a question. And I only saw it after it was a video recording. And I was like mortified. I was like, oh my God, I'm never doing that again. So it's just something I think that everybody, and in fact, that's the first exercise that I have my students do. And students are adults, by the way, but I have them record themselves and play it back. And they are just surprised at what
Mm.
they see and hear when they do that first exercise.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine.
Yes.
Maybe I'll do that when I get home. But I do have one more question for you before I let you go. Is how do you want people to think when they leave an interaction with you? How do you want to be remembered for?
I want them to feel enlightened and activated. And those words are very intentional. When I worked with a coach years ago, she was drilling down on what it is that I do and what result do I want to have and the impact. Those two words stood out, enlightened and activated. And if there's an interaction between me and someone else, I want to feel as though I'm adding to them, that I am contributing in some way. So they should feel a level of enlightenment. Hopefully, I've shared something new, better, or different with them. Hopefully, I've provided them a new perspective where they could see something in a different way that they're willing to try. And that comes with the activated being, I can see myself wanting to do something simply just like what you said. Well, maybe I'm going to try that. So that's you activating, saying, you know what, I think I am going to do this. So something in our conversation prompted you or is provoking you to say, oh, I want to do that. And I think that is what I want to leave people with, is that feeling activated and enlightened.
Wow, yeah, I love that. I really like those words.
Yes.
That's amazing. All right, before I let you go, can you tell the audience where to find you, if there's anything you're working on right now, anything to look for, social media, all those things?
Yes, so you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my jam. That's my spot. That's where I am most days. I also have a website, super easy, tianasanchez.com, Sanchez with a Z at the end. And I am up to a new, as we talked about, proprietary communication method called verbal gymnastics. And it's all about teaching people how to speak so they can stick their landing. And yes, it
Mm.
is kind of a play on words. I am not a gymnast, by the way. Although I did take gymnastics when I was a young sassy kid, but it's a 28-day challenge, and every day you work toward improving, improving your communication, but it's different than the speak formula. It's more about speaking with finesse and effort and seamless because, again, you think of your favorite gymnasts, they're agile, they're disciplined, but when they do their performance, it looks like art and it seems so seamless, but there's a lot that goes into that. So the verbal gymnastics is something that we are launching this year. So I would say keep an eye out on that. Stay connected to me because we will be launching that 28-day challenge. And again, connect with me on my website,
Amazing. Well, thank you so
LinkedIn.
much, Tiana, for joining us today. And it was great talking to you. So insightful on all things communication wise. And I hope that the audience found a lot of your advice helpful. I know I did for sure. So thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.